great. Today we're actually in a place called Seal. Yes, it's not the animal, it's actually a place, Seal, S-E-A-L, in Kent. Now sadly a lot of people remember Seal from the reports that were in the newspapers and press about Gavot, the actual picture of the chap, Seal man, Paul Gavot, 52. Now sadly he was jailed for 9.5, not sadly jailed, but sadly he stabbed his partner violently and her son in the house in Seal. And was then put into jail for 9.5 years. Never known in this area before, and suddenly it became national news and media publicity for Seal itself. But we're actually at St Peter and St Paul's Church. Amazing little church. It's certainly got a good feel about it around the graveyard. Built in 1243, but actually, as most things, as you can see from the landscape around, it's on a hill, which is no surprise there, so it can be seen for miles around. Being only less than 1,000 years old, it's certainly got a nice feel about it. And you wonder why, don't you? Why such a modern build would still have that ancient feel about it? It's because it's built on a Saxon burial ground, a Saxon church, which has much more meaning. When we certainly went inside a short while ago, it screams Freemasonry, it screams Masonic aspects of tales of fortunes, from raised degrees of the third, raising up from the coffin of death through to life again, to the... Interesting enough, I thought at first when I arrived that this was actually a knight. Now it is now a very interesting knight, and I think he's actually meant to be a personification of Boaz, which would make sense. And looking at it now, I'm pretty convinced that that's a representation of Boaz, which, as we know from Freemasonry, Boaz and Jachin, strength and wisdom, the two pillars of unity. So I'm going to put that down to a personification of Boaz. But let's just go inside and I'll just show you, just inside the doorway, what we mean by Freemasonry. Just inside here, it's quite a nice little area to come into the church. We can certainly see that we've got the square and compass straight away greeting you. Now, for those who don't know much about the square and compass, it's a measurement of your time and your actions that you do. If we go slightly above, we can see the Tau in the Philosopher's Stone, and it says a lot to me. It says much more than I expected to see here today. Yes, I expected to see the tales of bloodletting and blood spilling, which we will go to shortly at one of the stained paintings, but I didn't expect to see the Tau or the square and compass upon arrival. And it screams Freemasonry in here, but so it should, for a multitude of reasons. And let's just go inside here. And then you've got another little portrait, which would make sense for anyone that's being initiated into craft. They would see we've got the keys, we've got the sword, and the Holy Scriptures, the Word, the Logos. The Word was of God. God created the Word. It's very Masonic. The keys are quite representative of the 33rd degree of Freemasonry, and so that's again, it's got so much Masonic embolism. I can almost imagine waiting here to go into an initiation, hoodwinked perhaps, but going into initiation hoodwinked for the very first time as an entered apprentice and wondering what the hell's going to go on, as you get the wonderful knocks on the doors and reciprocated from the keeper at the other side, that no Cohen may enter. So it's very interesting in that sense. But let's just go inside and see. It's certainly designed to be much more than what it's here for. I mean, it's certainly got flexibility to it, from the pulpit to areas that this can come out to be one main hall area, in fact. It's certainly a lot of thought and process has gone into it. But I don't know, I get a sense of peace, but I get a sense that there is something here. There's definitely something here. And I had it much more as we walk, if we can walk down and see here to the main area. There's talks of the tales of a ghost, a female ghost, that with loppers tidies the graveyard and trims the bushes back. There's also stories of the monk who looks out of the window. And that would make sense because the window's now been blocked over, and it would have been over there somewhere. And I can imagine the monk being there. I certainly get the sense and feel of there's one particular entity, energy, whatever you call it, one particular apparition of Jinn that is most definitely present. And it's there's too many emblems and symbolism of Freemasonry for it not to be Masonic driven. We can see here, again here we've got the actual painting, which is an amazing painting, and it actually is telling the story of the sacrifice of blood, the blood sacrifice, the letting of blood, the draining of blood from the Jesus, as it were. So that's quite interesting in its own, might say, mind. But as we come along, there's for a church that's quite new in concept, it's got a lot of old things to it, a lot of old feels. And why did they build a church here? Who knows? Perhaps we should really think more about this lady here. Again, we've got the 33 degree symbols with the keys that are prominent in Christian tradition. The keys of the 33rd degree, when you're supposed to be coming to almost like a commander status. I hardly think that. But that's what is the myth and legend of it. Freemasonry goes much more beyond a 33rd degree. That's much higher than that. Then you have chapters and different spur-offs. But that's a story for another day. Here, what was I brought to was most particularly three things here, really. This is the one that particularly drew me in, and you can see actually it's quite. What I find this interesting is we've got skull and crossbones, 33rd degree again. We've got the 3rd degree, the raised craft, the raised initiation, where you are on the compass, the square and compass of time. You are thus into your grave, and you're now assisted from your coffin out. So therefore, life becomes death. You die in Freemasonry in your 3rd, and you are born again as a raised craft, as you're raised up. So this is very, very much Masonic driven. I particularly like this particular emblem because it reminds me of the Victorian period. And it's very Victorian, which is quite out of place, really, when we think about it. Because the lady in question, that I believe is the ghost of the graveyard, her name is Dorothy, we can see that up there. This is Victorian. Dorothy died in 1619. So this plaque, I would assume, has been put up at a later point in time. So what we're seeing here, as one type of explanation, would be that we've got the original slate carved, which was contrary of the time, at that particular period of time. I believe that's been embedded into this cast sometime in the Victorian period. That would explain why we've got Victorian statues on a 17th century tombstone, as it were. Because it makes no sense, does it? There's 200-300 years difference. So it makes no sense at all. You've got the usual things here. We've also got the, not so much this, but as in most churches, we have lots and lots of tombs that are embedded, encased, imprisoned even within the building itself. But what's of more importance would certainly be this particular one over here. Excuse me. Now we can see he's very Saxon, and we can tell he's Saxon from the most obvious things, and the obvious things being the horns, and we can see the tomb of the restless soldier. Which is particularly interesting, as I said, because this building is built on a Saxon church. If we just go down the aisle way for a minute, sort of taking you around a slow tour, just the things that matter at this church, St. Peter and St. Paul's. we're just going to head down to the main area here, which explains the pedigree line. We know that from Rotherham, the church we're going to next, we know that in Rotherham, St George's Church, that gives you a name for a church, St George's Church is very much a priory-led, priory-driven, Freemasonry, Knights Templar building, blah, blah. We know that already, that's nothing new. But what we didn't expect to see, what I didn't expect to see here, was some kind of record to the link between this church and Shipdham in Norfolk. Now, I think I've spoken about it before, where we talk about how surnames came about with taxation. Now, before then, this is where people get a little bit confused. We have the word de from Latin, which means of. So, if you were Janice Ford, you would be Janice de Ford. So, Janice of Ford, a place. Janice of Ford, Janice of wherever. So it became of, because there was no real surnames used at a certain point in time. There was also, if you take it back in history, you get the son of and daughter of, which is still very much used in an Icelandic tradition. They used dottir as a son of or daughter of. So you become, for example, a Fitzmaldred. He could be John Fitzmaldred. Fitz being of again, son of. So you could be John Fitz, son of, from the Norman side now, son of Maldred. So it's the son of Maldred, John. And that's how his name comes about. What we see here on this particular plaque, so it gives you a little bit of idea about how surnames come about, that they're not really, let's face it, they're just for the Her Majesty's corporation, aren't they? They're to make you a legal entity, to imprison you in this legal framework. That's why you have a name in the first place. There's lots of information you can read about the Crown Corporation, as I call it. It's not a Crown Court Service, it's a Crown Corporation. It's a money-making revenue generator. So, if we look here, we have, straight on here, we can look at the rectors, and we see straight away John of Shipdham. Shipdham is slightly spelled differently, because that's how it used to be spelled. But, okay, and that was 1354 for John of Shipdham, which makes sense because then the Neville family left this area once they did what they had to do, and then they moved on to Shipdham, where we've already been on our quest there as well.